Hello, Melissa, and welcome to Yes and. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I've gotten to know you a little bit. Just I've been sort of following you on LinkedIn and seeing your posts, and always like the kind of things you do. So I know a little bit about you and your background. But just to kick things off for listeners who don't know you, could you give us like the 1 minute overview of? I know it's hard to compress down, but the kind of who you are and what you do.
My background, I'm a multi-passionate creative. I do not come from a corporate background. I trained as a dancer at Juilliard. I actually kind of fell backwards into after believing that I was a non-creative person for most of my teen years and throughout college. I kind of fell backwards into an art career as a professional artist, professional calligrapher and artist. And during that time, I got very stuck into a story of I don't have time to make art for my own enjoyment, which is why I got into being an artist in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really miserable, found the holy grail of making my living as an artist and was really miserable doing that. And finally got back to um, making art for my own enjoyment, figured out how to get past that creative block. And the route to that was, guess what? Play.
Mm-hmm.
But after 15 years of making art at the behest of other people, I'd forgotten how to play. So I had to create a set of little rules for myself, little
Mm-hmm.
guidelines for myself in order to get back to that playful state. And really what that is like being a little kid again.
Mm-hmm.
And that little set of rules that I developed way back when, this is about 2010, 2011, expanded over the next couple of years into 10 guideposts, which now form the scaffolding of my book, The Creative
Mm-hmm.
Sandbox Way. And that led me to sort of fall backwards into a second business as a creativity instigator, helping other people get creatively unstuck. And that was a fully online business, except once a year, I led a creativity retreat where people would come and mostly work independently on their own creative projects. But after breakfast every day, I would lead people through improv activities, what I
Sure. Yep.
called a creative catalyzing session to get them out of their heads and into their bodies, get them laughing and moving so that we could send the gremlins out of the room, those voices in their head saying
Mm-hmm.
things like, this is a waste of time. Why are you doing this? You're so lame. You're not a real artist. All those critical, self-judging voices, get
Mm-hmm.
them out of the room so we can get down to the business of doing our creative thing. And over the years of leading this retreat, I realized, hey, these activities that I'm leading people through, this is the same thing that I would be doing if I were working with a team of leaders, a team of engineers, a team of any kind of corporate team, business team. So why don't I pivot and work with people in a room, which is where I actually shine? So that led me to pivot and start my consultancy back in 2017. And I was just sort of getting up to speed with that. And then a little thing called a pandemic happened.
That was that.
And so I spent the next, few years designing virtual experiences and really sort of nailing how to help companies in the corporate space improve their communication for influence and impact. And now, what I really help leaders and teams and companies do, especially those who are really needing to innovate on a timeline, is I
Mm-hmm.
help them create the impossible. And I do that through my Create the Impossible framework, whether it's via keynotes or workshops or programs, whatever the delivery mechanism is. I come in with a lot of play and I help with the three C's: connection, communication, and creativity. And that's my jam.
Wow. Well, that is great, and you mentioned a whole bunch of stuff that I want to ask about and dig deeper on. One of the most interesting things, which I'll hold a talk about later, is but what you describe. It's funny. It's almost reversed because I've been pretty much from the get go going and speaking to organizations. But when you describe like, oh, I work with people, and then like once a year I did a retreat, that's literally something I've been thinking about putting together myself. Like, like I love speaking because, as you said, like it's being in a room with in front of a lot of people. But I've been thinking for a long time about doing a more business to consumer, get individuals in a room and run them through improv things and help them unlock their creativity and be more positive with yes and things like that. So it's almost the reverse. So I want to learn more about kind of that and what you did as sort of quote unquote free consulting for myself. But let's start with kind of your most current thing, which is this create the impossible framework. Which as soon as I saw that, resonated with me because depending on the specific topic of the keynote, I mentioned this idea of saying yes and to impossible goals. Like, we got SMART goals, which are achievable and realistic, and that's great. I think we need those as project management. But the thing that I think sets people on fire and actually makes life more interesting is not making it easier, but setting a goal that really you don't know how to achieve and then having it creative about. So when I saw them, oh, this is great. Melissa talks about this. So I'd love to learn about to whatever degree you're willing to go into it, a little bit about your kind of create the impossible framework and how you work with people to work their way through it.
Absolutely. So the Create the Impossible framework has 3 steps, and it sounds deceptively simple, but the most powerful tools often are really quite simple.
Mm-hmm.
So step number 1 is play hard. Now, this is not, we often think work hard, play hard, and play hard. We often think of like, go to Vegas and get wild. Oh, yeah. That is not what I'm talking about. Play hard in the context of the Create the Impossible framework means to embrace your inner 4-year-old. It means to experiment, to explore, to follow your curiosity. And so in this context, it is, just let yourself follow your nose, try things, take risks, just get down and dirty and be like a little kid playing in a sandbox. That is the concept of play hard. And I have on my YouTube channel and on my blog and in my LinkedIn posts, I post a newsletter every week on LinkedIn and also to my subscribers to my, personal newsletter or my business newsletter. Every week I come out with a newsletter where I apply the framework in a different context. And I talk about how play hard and all the 2 other steps of the framework, how they apply. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step, play hard.
So can I, before we move on to the second step, I want to dig a little deeper. Well, first, normally we kind of do it all at the end, but since you just mentioned it, nothing, we're doing podcasts for promotion. So, you mentioned you have a newsletter, YouTube channel, and I'll link to this in the notes, but for people who maybe are driving and just listening, where can they go to get access to the newsletter and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is my name, melissadinwiddie.com. And it's, it's not a very common name. So I'll spell it for you. Melissa, D as in David, IN as in Nancy, WIDDIE.com, melissadinwiddie.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Melissa Dinwiddie. And those are the 2, places where I'm most active. You can find me there. And you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website. And then I also post the same content. I repurpose it and post it again on LinkedIn the following week. So it's just a little older, but you can follow it there. And then my YouTube channel is also my name, Melissa Dinwiddie. So same thing.
That's great. It's nice to be easily, get all consistent, which is good. All right. So let's talk about the being playful. The power of play. I'm sorry, I wrote down exactly how was it. With the first step,
play hard.
Play hard. That's it. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was like 2 minutes ago. I forgot already. But play hard. So let's say you're working, because I think most of the people who are listening to this are professionals, kind of office knowledge type workers. So if you're working with a group of HR people or accountants or engineers or whatever, I think one thing that's hard for people, at least people in my audience sometimes, I'll speak about these ideas like yes and they agree and it's in the abstract, but then when it's like, well, what do I actually do? So if you've got someone listening who's like, oh, I like that idea of following my nose and being like a 4-year-old, but when they wake up tomorrow morning, like what is one thing you would recommend they do to start down this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about like when you got to bring your team together for a meeting, for example. And so maybe you know that you want your team to cohere, you want them to get to know each other and all of that, but you know, so you ask people to, share something about how their day's going or something like that. Well, you can make that more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think about ways that you can, first of all, connection is hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
If you want your team to communicate well, if you want them to, which you do, if you want to innovate, right? If you want
Mm-hmm.
them to be creative and come up with the best ideas, they have to communicate well. They have to, if you want dots to be connecting, you want them to be communicating most effectively. And one way to do that is to get a playful environment happening. So just your first meeting of the day, any meeting throughout the week, how can you bring a playful atmosphere to that meeting? So for example, your morning check-in, instead of saying, how are you feeling today? You might do something as simple as, if you were a weather report, what is your weather? What is your
Mm-hmm.
what is your weather like today? So as people go around the room, instead of saying, how are you feeling today, Melissa? Or how are you feeling today, Avish? Which is inviting them to say, I'm fine.
Yep.
They're not getting any information from you, right? You're not getting any
Mm-hmm.
information from your team if they're just going to say, I'm fine. But they might say, well, I'm cloudy with a bit of rain, or I'm sunny with a little bit of clouds, or I'm a snowstorm today.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's sort of curious. I wonder what that means. So they get to have a little creativity,
Yep.
and it invites some curiosity, and it's a little more playful. And it might encourage people to have some conversations afterwards, or it might encourage some conversations right then. Oh, tell me more. Tell me more about what that cloudy with a chance of rain means.
Hmm.
So that's one small example
Yeah.
of how bringing a little bit of playfulness into just a simple check-in at the beginning of a meeting can actually change the environment and change the culture and encourage creativity, which can lead to greater breakthroughs and innovation down the road.
And what I like about that is I think sometimes, especially when you're like a speaker or consultant, people think in order to implement, they have to do this like giant, like, we need to completely change the culture on day one. How are we going to be? We're now going to be a playful workplace. And, oh, how do we do that? Well, I don't know. Let's bring in bicycle horns and seesaws in the middle of the break room. And it's like, oh, but, just these little steps, like, oh, just, maybe switching up the question to make it adding little bits of playfulness, relieves that pressure and makes it actually doable, I think. Because I think the easiest way for people to not do anything is to be like, oh, I gotta have the whole thing figured out before I start. And what you're
Yeah,
recommending is just little things to start.
tiny, tiny little things. I mean, another example, apropos the name of your podcast, is incorporating the yes and technique from improv. Just anytime anyone shares any kind of an idea, and this is a muscle that I encourage everyone to practice, and I'm sure you talk about this a lot,
Mm-hmm.
is just practice building on it rather than immediately evaluating it. And this practice alone is going to create a more playful generative conversation and a more playful generative culture, which is something that we need
Mm-hmm.
if we want to build cultures of innovation and creativity. So that's another example. Some other easy ones that are, very small. And this is not about like, you have to just dramatically overhaul everything and it has to be these, huge,
Mm-hmm.
impossible to achieve steps. No, we're talking about tiny little steps that together are going to help you create the impossible. Something like implementing Wild Idea Wednesday or
Mm-hmm.
whatever day works for you. Set aside just 10 minutes where team members can share their most outlandish solutions to whatever your current challenge is. And the rule, this is really, really important, is that no idea is too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another tip. If you're going to do this, you're the leader, you're establishing this container for this Wild Idea Wednesday or whatever day it is. You put out the first idea and make sure that your idea is so outlandish, so just beyond the pale that it creates space for other people to throw out crazy ideas as well. If your idea is, a 5 out of 10, then nobody's going to put out an idea that's above a 5. But if your idea is a 12 out of 10, then that ensures that other people will let their ideas be 10s.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like leading by example and setting the tone.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not like by decree, like, all right, now you are going to be playful. It's all right. No, we all need to, we all need to do this, and I'm gonna do it as well. So one more question about kind of creating this play hard culture mindset. How do you deal with, or how do you recommend leaders deal with, for lack of a better term, the sourpuss, the person who's been there for a long time, is set in their ways. Work is supposed to be serious. I don't come to work to have fun. Like, I don't want to do this silly nonsense. I just want to do my work and go home. Like, how do you break down some of those barriers while still kind of honoring that as an individual?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, one of the things that you just mentioned before, we were just talking about, is leading by example. And if the leader gets pulled down by the sourpuss, then you're dead in the water. But if the leader leads by example, maybe has a conversation with the sourpuss and says, hey, let's talk about this. What's your hang up here? I want to hear from you. And, be authentic about it. Don't just dismiss them or block them or whatever. Like, they have their feelings about it, and acknowledge that they have feelings about it, and share your feelings about why you're doing this. Like, if you're really gonna carry a flag for why you feel that play and this type of culture is important for your organization, then share why that feels important to you. And, one of the things that I really believe in is being transparent and being authentic. And if you just, want to ignore something, I don't feel like that is going to create a healthy culture. So you can acknowledge that you may not like this, you may not agree with it. This is what feels important to me, and this is where we're going. And let's talk about why you don't think this is, useful or whatever. Let's talk about it. And feel, one of the things that I have found as a leader myself of different kinds of organizational groups, being open to pushback, like push back at me. Okay, push back. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and my bias, and for everyone listening, if it's not obvious already, you have a improv background as well, so you're very familiar with all the concepts and stuff. But yeah, I talk about that as a leader, being a yes and leader, which is being open when that feedback or pushback comes, instead of arguing with it and being immediate, like, oh yeah, but let me point out why I was right, or why, like, it's like, be open to it and dig deeper in it, and like you said, build that kind of transparency and connection, which goes a long way towards culture and opening that mindset to play. All right, awesome. That's the first. Well, we spent that long just talking just about the first step in the framework. So we've got play hard. So then, what would be the second step?
Second step, and this is so corporate speak. Not. Second step is make crap.
I love it, but I would like you to explain that further for people that maybe don't understand it out of hand.
Yes. So here's the thing. We have to allow ourselves to suck before we can unsuck. Think about somebody like Thomas Edison, right? He didn't just like create a light bulb, boom, first attempt, beautiful working light bulb. No, he made thousands, and I don't know how many thousands of failed attempts at light bulbs before he made a working light bulb. If he said, the very first time I make this attempt at a light bulb, it has to work, and if it doesn't, I'm done, I'm never trying again, nobody would have light bulbs, right? So we have to allow ourselves to take risks, try things, and learn from those failed attempts. And so many of us get stuck not even ever trying, because we feel like whatever we try has to be excellent. It has to be great. It has to be perfect. And because it's not going to be,
Mm-hmm.
we hold ourselves back and we never try. That's called perfectionism, and it does not benefit us. So, step two is make crap. We need the crap to fertilize the good stuff.
I like that. Uh, that's a nice way of looking at it. It's very true. I think we're just talking about like how people wait to have it all figured out before they're willing to take the first step, and that's sort of a similar thing. Like, oh, I can't produce, or I can't ship, or I can't even open my mouth to suggest an idea until I'm like really certain it's gonna be perfect, and not be criticized or not fail, whatever. So, and I think that is so much ingrained, and I talk about this a little when I talk about creativity as well. Like from the moment you start walking and talking as a kid, you're constantly being told like that's not good enough, or you're not doing it right, you have to pay attention, and so we get this like mental complex and filter. So how do we go about breaking that down? Like how do you start building that ability to make crap, because it's so antithetical to what so many people feel is the proper way of working?
Yeah, it takes a lot of sort of peeling off of layers of how we've learned to adult, right? We have gone through the school system, we've gone up the career ladder, putting on these layers of masks and whatever in order to show how excellent we are, so that we never reveal that we're actually scared little kids inside and we don't know what we're doing, and we never want to show that. We never want to reveal any weakness,
Mm-hmm.
show any imperfection. But in order to be creative, we have to take risks. It's essential. It's part of the creative process. And if we want to innovate, we have to allow ourselves that risk-taking part of the creative process. Otherwise, innovation's not going to be happening. So we have to peel off those layers, and we have to sort of relearn, going back to that, being a little kid. We didn't have to learn that as little kids. We just automatically loved trying things. We were in that, what would happen if
Mm-hmm.
space when we were little kids. So we have to sort of relearn that, or unlearn the stuff that we learned away from that. The layers that sort of got on top of us,
Mm-hmm.
that have prevented us from not doing what used to be natural.
So do you
It
have
takes practice.
this one might be a little bit harder, but kind of like in the first step in the framework, do you have anything that like a way for people to get started with this, because it is sort of like a big psychological thing just to kind of get started being willing to make crap, or starting to make crap?
Well, yes. So one sort of tool kit that I highly recommend for people is actually improv,
Mm-hmm.
because improv is just a beautiful set of tools that really helps people lean into uncertainty, allow ourselves to fail. That is a huge part and
Mm-hmm.
parcel of the entire sort of improv set of tools. Is when you make a mistake on stage, it's actually gold.
Yeah.
Audiences love to see people make a mistake on stage. And for improvisers, it's incredible. It's a great offer whenever there's a mistake on stage, because now as a performer, you have to justify it. You have to figure out why, like, somebody just called me Emily and somebody else called me Catherine. How can I be both Emily and Catherine? What are we going to do about that? We have to figure
Mm-hmm.
out how to resolve that mistake that just happened on stage. It just happened. The audience saw it. What are we going to do about it? We
Mm-hmm.
have to figure that out. So, and the audience is going like, oh my God, what are they going to do? And in improv, instead of pretending it didn't happen, or blocking the person who made the mistake or whatever, we roll with it.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of training, that's the kind of thing that everybody in any organization can use, because mistakes happen all the time, right? And so in an improv class, you get, or, whatever, some kind of improv training, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you get used to that experience happening in class where the stakes are low.
Yep.
And then you can incorporate that in your regular life outside of class. And it doesn't feel as impossible to deal with those kinds of mistakes in the rest of life.
Yeah, I love. Obviously, I'm fully on board. And when I do programs, I'm like, people want to know how to keep practicing this, and I say take an improv class. Then I joke, I'm like, I know none of you are going to do that, so here's some exercises you can do as well. But take an improv class because A, it's fun, and B, you learn stuff. And I just want to share a quick, just because you mentioned a quick little improv example. A few years back, me and a buddy, we did a 2-man improv podcast where we improvised a whole movie. We'd pick a genre, we'd talk about it for 15 minutes. What are the tropes? And then we just act out a movie with the two of us, but we did it using short form improv games. So it was like 4 improv games to move the narrative forward. And around the holidays, we did a Hallmark Christmas movie called, there was 2, it's called Near Miss Kiss. And the main character's name we started was, I believe, Holly. And then in one scene, my partner referred to her as Noelle. It's the exact same thing you said. And literally in that moment, and I think I wrote an article about this, we could have said, oh, don't you mean Holly? Or, oh, you made a mistake, and move on. The entire rest of the movie became about how, oh, no, Noelle was the main male character's, like, dead fiance, and now Holly, like, the whole story completely changed direction because, like you said, that one mistake is the gold, is the offer. And so often, like, in our lives, we look at anything that goes wrong, and not even a mistake, because a mistake means it wasn't supposed to happen, but anything that's not according to the plan is as bad and needs to be changed. And so I love that idea. Like, that is so encouraging why you make crap. Number one, you make crap because you have to get it out there, otherwise nothing gets done. But 2, like you said, sometimes the crap is like, oh, well, that's not what I thought it would be, but this might be even better.
Yes. I mean, I'm just thinking about companies like, I mean, these are well-worn stories. So your listeners are going to probably know of these, they're old hat or whatever, but like Post-it notes was 3M, I guess, I think it was. Somebody will, I'm sure, correct us if I'm wrong, but trying to make a super sticky glue, and it came out not sticky enough.
Yep.
And they sort of shelved it for a while, and then it ended up becoming Post-it notes, which is one of the, probably most profitable products that, that they've made, right? And there's tons of these examples where companies were trying to do one thing and something else came about, and they're like, yeah, whatever, we're going to put this on a shelf for a while, and then that ended up becoming its own incredibly profitable product.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is a result of, you got to try things, let yourself make crap, and then that crap might just go on to fertilize some really good stuff.
And I think there's another, like, obviously you and I speak to organizations, associations, so, sometimes the conversations about that. But I think on an individual level, that's also a lesson, because I think so many times people don't want to take a step like take an improv class or go dancing or travel or try or put in for that volunteer committee or promotion because, like, I don't know what's going to happen or I might fail at it. Like, yeah, take an improv class and you might hate it, but who knows, maybe there'll be one aspect of it you really liked. Like, I went to school to be an engineer, and I started out to be a mechanical engineer. I'm not sure why. And after about a year and a half into it, I realized the only thing I enjoyed in any of those mechanical engineering classes was when the professor said, okay, go write a computer program to simulate this mechanical engineering problem. Now, that I got into. So, I shifted to computer engineering, got back to my, Indian roots to be a computer engineer. But it's kind of that thing, like, if I'd waited till I knew exactly, I would never have figured it out. So it's not just an organizational thing, but as an individual. And I think it goes back to your first point of play hard. Someone might be sitting there saying, well, what will play look like for me? Like, I don't know, just pick something and try it. And maybe the first thing you try to be playful will suck, but you learn and then you move on from it. And so they kind of fit together, the points in the framework.
They totally fit together. Another great example is the end of last year, I was debating, do I want to start a local group to get active in civic action?
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. What do I know? I don't know. Do I want to take this on? I don't know. But what I did know is that I really needed an in-person community in order to stay sane. Mm-hmm. And to keep each other buoyed up and to keep each other taking action. And so I sent an email out, and 12 people, I guess it was 11 people because it was 12 of us all together,
Hmm.
responded. And we got together in somebody's living room. And it's 3 months later. This group is now almost 230 people.
Wow.
And a whole leadership team has just sort of emerged because people stepped forward because they also really needed something. And I am now basically the CEO of a startup. It's not really a startup because it's a community group, so
Yeah.
it's not doesn't have the same structure as a corporation, but it has taken off. And I've met, these are all people that I like had, I didn't know these people 3 months ago. And we've become incredibly close, and we are creating something and having impact that I never would have been able to have on my own. And it took me, you know, playing hard by going, what would happen if, let's try something. And also, I founded this group with the intention of it's going to be based in fun and connection and play. So
Hmm.
every meeting we have, it always starts with play in order to get people laughing and connecting. And our last meeting, by the way, had 130 people attending.
Wow.
And I facilitated and led the whole thing. And the feedback was, this is the best one. Some of the feedback, one person literally said, and I quote, "This is the best organized meeting I've ever attended." So that was pretty validating. And it's gotten people really fired up. And the actions that are happening as a result, I could not have done this on my own. And I was
Hmm.
feeling so isolated and so depressed. And by just saying, I'm going to play, I'm going to try something, I'm going to experiment, I'm going to take a risk.
Hmm.
And I did that. And then, you know, made a bunch of crap.
And it was just one step, really, right? You send one email out and then just let it kind of.
Yeah.
And so, also, we've kind of gotten very into talking, which is good, but I also want to make sure we get to the third point. But I do want to talk about one thing you mentioned there that I'm curious about. If you talk about it or how you see it fitting in, you talk about how you wanted to make sure it had play and fun and that worked. And so I think there's this whole element there of this maybe overused word now, but authenticity, which is when it came to play and making crap and taking action, like you didn't just say, "Oh, here's what people do who build a successful group. Let me go do that." You said, "Here's who I am. Here's why I want to do this." So where, if anywhere, do you see the role between kind of your framework and like the individual and being authentic to yourself?
Yeah, well, I didn't know what other people did. I mean, in that particular case, I had no idea what other people
You
did.
mean you didn't go on to like Chat GPT and type in how do I start a community group and just and just
I
do it that
no, I
way?
actually didn't. I do use AI tools a
I
lot,
do as well.
but I didn't in that case. I didn't say what do other people do. I just was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I need support just in order to survive personally.
Yeah.
It was a purely selfish motive.
Yeah, and that's
uh,
stepping into uncertainty and just being willing, like you're willing,
yeah,
I guess, to have it not work too. If you did that first meeting and it was a
yeah,
disaster, you either would have
yeah,
learned and moved on, or just said, okay, let's do something else. And
yeah. I was just totally vulnerable, and I just put myself out there. Um, and I think that I'm a big believer in transparency and authenticity. And I also will be vulnerable and say that it is often a challenge for me personally to sort of navigate that with my desire to, look like I know what I'm doing.
hmm yeah, and that is a. I think that's where some of perfectionism comes from. We want people to look at us, and it's so. And
Yeah.
I talked about this in the keynote this week about like we are so unwilling. We still want to look like we know what we're doing, but that people are unwilling to say I don't know, and yet when you actually say I don't know to someone because it's vulnerable, people suddenly like trust you even more than
Yeah.
when you act like you have all the answers and know everything. It's this weird mindset to get out of. All right, so just to make sure we get to all the points. All right, so we got the first two. So what is the third step in the create the impossible framework?
Yeah. Okay. So step 3 is learn fast.
Mm-hmm.
And this step is about turning every experience, especially the failures, into valuable data. So instead of getting stuck in perfectionism or analysis paralysis, innovative teams create rapid feedback loops that accelerate learning. So, we've played hard, we've made crap, and now what are we going to do with that? We've made some crap, some of it worked, some of it didn't, and now we're going to learn from those failures and iterate. And this is a constant cycle. So we're going to play hard some more, we're going to make some more crap, and we're going to learn fast from it. And we're going to play hard some more. We're going to make some more crap and learn fast from that. It is a constant cycle. We're just going to keep going around and around. And from this cycle, that is where those breakthroughs and innovations come from. It's just repeating this cycle over and over again. So I find myself just like constantly in one or more parts of this cycle at all times. And it is through this cycle, my keynote really, I have my sort of flagship keynote about this Create the Impossible framework. Really sort of the upshot is that this is not a one and done. This idea of, I have struggled personally with the idea of, I'm not creative. And I know a lot of people have struggled and do struggle with that inner voice that says they're not creative enough, whether they're, engineering types or technical types or whatever. Even those who consider themselves to be artists often think of themselves as not creative enough or not creative in this arena or that arena or whatever. Even when I was making my living as an artist, I still felt like, okay, well, I'm making my living as an artist, but I'm not, I'm not a realist, or I'm not a this kind of an artist, or I'm not that kind of an artist, or I'm not able to do this thing. Or we put ourselves in boxes, and we get put in boxes by what other people tell us about ourselves. And there's always some story or some other story that somehow gets embedded as like our internal code that we constantly have to like push up against over and over and over again in one arena or another. And really, the message that I want to get across to people is that all of these stories we can unravel, and we can bust through these like self-installed glass ceilings. And the framework is a tool for doing that over and over again. It's not a one and done, but we have the ability to bust through, unlearn those stories, bust through them, and shape our own lives the way we want to.
Okay, well, now you're speaking kind of something that's been at the forefront of my mind recently, because I've been kind of thinking about some of the stories I've been telling, and I was just listening to an audiobook about like, your kind of subconscious beliefs and things like that, and how, logically you're fine. And so, and it's funny you talk about the art thing. I've done improv for 30 years, ran my own group, taught at Temple, things like that, but Temple University. But I never went through like Second City and whatnot. And there are a few speakers like us out there that incorporate improv into their speaking. I come across one I don't know, and then I see in their little bio like studied at Second City for this many years, or was an instructor at UCB, and all of a sudden all these like doubts, the voice like, oh man, why would anyone book you, Avish? Like, you didn't. And logically, I've sort of worked my way out of that, and to a degree, I use it as a selling point almost. Like, look, if you go there, they're gonna do what all the traditionally trained improv people do, but I kind of develop my own thing. So that's neither here nor there. But so I'm very interested in this idea, and we're not gonna have time to go through your 10 guideposts. But for people listening, if you go to Melissa's website, you can get download some of her Creative Sandbox Way book, and it goes into this, so you can learn more about this 10 guideposts. But jumping ahead to number 8, your eighth guidepost is dismiss all gremlins. And you just mentioned the gremlin thing. So in this moment, that one seems very relevant to me. So I was wondering if, maybe we can touch upon a couple of guideposts. If you could mention a little bit about kind of what do you mean and how does one dismiss the gremlins?
Oh, this is my kind of worst issue. The hardest issue for me is the gremlins. And the biggest gremlin for me is the comparison trap,
Mm-hmm.
which is oh my God, they're so much better than I am. I'm never going to meet up with their. The gremlins are, I've got one right here. I don't know. Is this going to be on video, Avish? Because
The main podcast will be audio, but I'm going to put the video clip so they'll see your little gremlin.
anyone who sees on video, I've got this little finger puppet gremlin, and I give these out at my creativity retreats. Everybody gets to pick a gremlin. They're all different. Yeah, they're the worst. They're the voice in your head, and they like to disguise themselves as the voice of truth, the voice of reason, and the voice of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
They are not, but they will lie. They will do anything to try. They're trying to keep you safe. They're trying to keep you safely inside your comfort zone. So they will do anything to keep you from taking any kind of a risk, to keep you from stepping outside your comfort zone. Here's the thing, creativity is outside your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime these little gremlin voices, anytime they detect you getting anywhere near the edge of your comfort zone, they're going to do anything they can to keep you inside. They will say nasty things. They will lie like a rug in order to keep you where you are. So you never grow. You never try anything. And so our job is to get really good at discerning what is the voice of truth, the voice of wisdom, the voice of reason, and what is a gremlin. And when you can start to recognize those voices, often it will sound like an authority figure, a real authority figure in your life. They like to take on those, maybe your mom or your dad or a teacher, sometimes not. But when you can start to discern, oh my gosh, that's a gremlin, then you can say to yourself, oh, whatever that voice says not to do, I know I actually need to do that thing. It's telling me it's a stop sign, but it's actually a go sign.
Oh, I like that. So you're just kind of reversing it, like when my little tip for that is it's basically the yes but voice in your head, right? It's like most of the time it's that little yeah but you can't do that, or yeah but it's not going to work, and
yep.
But I like that the voice that's telling you to stop. When you identify it as a gremlin, then that's the thing. There's like that whole kind of old saying about like the thing you fear or feel you can't do, that's the very thing you should do. It's kind of like that when that little voice, because I like that. I never really thought about it that way, though. It is got a positive intention of trying to keep you safe by keeping you in your comfort zone, but that's also going to keep you limited. And then, so the first step sounds like the first step is just awareness, starting to pay attention.
Yeah.
Because I think so many people are on autopilot and they just, I can't do that. But just paying attention to that voice is the first step.
Absolutely. Paying attention to that voice, noticing when it's actually that gremlin voice trying to keep you safe. And what I like to do is acknowledge it, thank it for its concern. And then this is what I do, modify it for your own circumstances. I send it off to get a pedicure.
Oh.
And then I set boundaries, like you are not allowed in my creative sandbox. Like if I'm making art or doing something creative, writing or something like that, you're not allowed in my creative sandbox. Gremlins don't pay attention to rules. So they're gonna keep popping up, but I can say, look, thank you so much for your concern. You're not allowed here. I'm going to send you off to get another pedicure. They get way more pedicures than I do.
You're gonna have some amazing toes, yeah.
They have amazing toes, but at least that helps me to establish like, oh yeah, there's that gremlin again. Thank you so much for your concern. I really appreciate that you're trying to keep me safe, but it's not useful for me. So I'm going to send you off to get another pedicure.
I love it. So it's almost like when you're teaching people meditation, like try not to think of anything, but when you do think of anything, don't get upset and don't just quit. Just be like, try to, let those thoughts go again. Same with the gremlin. Like when it comes back, don't be like, oh, I'm a failure. And it's sort of like goes back to being playful and making crap. Like it's not going to work the first time. You just got to let it go again. And that's how you learn and continuously get better and better.
Yeah. And it's a playful way for dealing with that voice that we are all going to have. The gremlins never go away. In fact, the more successful you get, the more visible you get, the more gremlins are going to appear. Because guess what? You're stepping further and further outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. The expansion, your comfort zone is expanding, you're expanding. And, we all keep growing as humans, right? So you're pushing further out to your comfort zone. Your gremlins are going to pop up even more. So we have to get better and better at discerning, there's the gremlin again. I have to get more playful
Yeah.
and thank it for its concern and send it off again.
Yeah. And so I think if we think about it as your framework and how the framework is iterative, not a one off, it kind of, you got to keep working through that, not just externally, but even kind of internally in your own mind to do this. Um, well, okay. Well, that's great. So just to kind of recap, so the framework is the create the impossible is play hard, um,
Make crap.
make crap, and then learn
Learn
fast.
fast. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
That is awesome. And we're kind of coming close to the end of our time here. And I'm going to let you kind of remind people where and how they can find you and then kind of finish up with one last question. But before we get to that, is there anything else kind of you want people to know about you or the process or anything you think would be particularly helpful for someone listening kind of to take away and apply?
Yeah, well, what I'd love to share is I have what I call my golden formula, which is I state it in the form of a mathematical formula,
Mm-hmm.
which is self-awareness plus self-compassion equals the key to everything good. So we were talking about self-awareness in terms of gremlins,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the more you understand yourself and can have an awareness of what's happening with you, how you're feeling physically, emotionally, all of that, this is really important. And then self-compassion is an understanding of common humanity, that whatever's happening with you, other people have experienced that as well. It's mindfulness, ability to separate yourself out from whatever distress is happening right now, and self-kindness. And I see Zoom had a raise
Yeah.
hand over
Notice
there.
you raising your hand. It's like, oh, I should raise my hand.
So when you can combine this awareness of what's happening with yourself and self-kindness, this self-compassion for whatever you've just experienced, truly it's a life-changing formula. So it really is a key to everything good. And for self-compassion, I highly recommend Dr. Kristen Neff's book titled Self-Compassion. She is the
Oh.
world's foremost expert on self-compassion.
Well, I love that. And that's, I think, something I resonates with me with what I'm kind of working on these days. So I love that. Self awareness plus self compassion was the key to everything good.
Everything good, yeah. And
So yeah, I will look
I,
up that book and I'm gonna write that formula down and use that because I think I do agree. And it's so, I mean, this is gonna sound where it sounds so like soft and squishy, like oh, self compassion and self awareness, but it is. It's so important to know yourself and be kind to yourself because I think so many of us hold ourselves back and limit us because we have no idea what's going on in our heads, and when something happens, we beat ourselves up over it, and just those two simple things can make such a huge difference. Well, thank you for making sure you added that one on at the end. That was really helpful and powerful. So just remind everyone if they want to learn more about you or work with you, either as a consultant or a speaker or one on one. I don't know. Just let people know.
Absolutely. So my website is melissadinwiddie.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Melissa Dinwiddie. You can find me on YouTube at, again, Melissa Dinwiddie. And I made a little thank you download for the podcast listeners. I have a QR code if you're watching this on YouTube that you can use, and a bit.ly link, which is bit.ly/yes and thank you, all lowercase.
Ooh, love it.
And you can go there. It does ask you for a name and email address, although I don't add you to any kind of a mailing list if you sign up there. And you'll get the first 50 pages of my book, The Creative Sandbox Way, and it asks for a little bit of feedback. Or you can go to my website also and get the first 50 pages of my book there too.
Love
but you
it.
get
Well, we'll
a
put
little
those links
thank you.
in. We'll put the website, the YouTube, the LinkedIn, and the bit.ly link in the show notes as well. Or if you're watching this on video, you can use the QR code. I love it. I love you got your face in there. That's very nice. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you for chatting. I'm going to finish up with a final question that I like as my last question for everyone who appears on here. Uh, I talk about yes and one of the reasons I do that is I honestly believe the world would be a better place if everyone just shifted their default, their first response from yes but to yes and. It would make us all kinder, more respectful, better communicators, and everything. So, what is one small thing that you believe if everyone was better at, or if everyone just did a little bit differently, it would make the world a better place?
Oh, what a great question. I believe that if everybody could have more self-compassion
Mm-hmm.
and compassion towards others, empathy and compassion towards others, that would make the world a much better place.
Well, I cannot disagree with that. Great answer. Thank you so much, Melissa. I had a fabulous time, and look forward to chatting again in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me, Avish. This has been so much fun, and I just have loved talking with you and would love to come back anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you.